She walked into the store with quiet confidence, her clothes plain but clean, her hair tied back in a simple bun. Nothing about her screamed wealth or status, just an ordinary woman going about her day. But the moment she stepped inside, the air shifted. The store assistant gave her a once-over and rolled her eyes. Whispers started, followed by the unmistakable sting of judgment. She was ignored, dismissed, and finally told she didn't belong there. The other shoppers looked on, some with pity, others with smug satisfaction. She tried to speak up, to explain, but no one listened. The assistant insisted she leave, waving her toward the door like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. As she stepped outside, cheeks burning and eyes clouded with tears, one thought raced through her mind. Asterisk, if only they knew the truth, asterisk. Because this wasn't just any woman. She was the wife of one of the country's most powerful and private billionaires, a man who didn't flaunt his wealth, but never let anyone disrespect the woman he loved. And just as she stood there, humiliated and unsure of what to do next, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the store. The door opened. Out stepped a man whose presence could silence a room. Heads turned, eyes widened. The same assistant who just kicked the woman out now stood frozen in place. He looked at his wife, then at the store behind her. His voice was calm, but the edge in his tone could cut steel. What happened next? It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was unforgettable. Stay with me, because you won't believe how one man's quiet power changed everything in a matter of minutes. The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. One look into his eyes was enough to make the store staff shrink back. He wrapped his arm gently around his wife, checking her face like she was made of glass. She managed a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The pain was still fresh, still raw. Everyone around them was staring now, some trying to figure out who he was, others finally recognizing him. Whispers began to spread. Isn't that? Could it really be him? But let's take a step back. This woman, the one they judged by her simple dress and quiet presence, hadn't always lived this life. Just a few years ago, she worked 2 jobs, struggling to pay rent and care for her sick mother. She never asked for help, never expected handouts, and she certainly never imagined her life would cross paths with a man like him. They met by accident, a coffee spilled on a crowded street, an apology, a conversation that turned into something more. He didn't tell her who he was at first. He liked that she treated him like a person, not a bank account, that she listened more than she spoke. She was kind, grounded, and strong in ways no one saw. So when he asked her to marry him, it wasn't for show. It wasn't to complete some picture-perfect image. It was real. They kept their life private, by choice. No flashing headlines, no red carpets, just love. But sometimes the world doesn't see what's real. Sometimes people judge by what's on the surface. And in that store, surrounded by designer bags and polished glass, they thought they saw a poor woman pretending. They were wrong. And soon, they were about to find out how wrong. The store manager finally appeared, clearly flustered, having heard whispers that someone important had just walked in. He glanced at the assistant, then at the man now standing beside the woman she had just thrown out. His smile was forced, his voice suddenly sweet, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. The assistant shifted nervously, trying to smooth over her earlier words, now acting as if the woman was just misunderstood. But the billionaire said nothing to her. Instead, he focused on his wife, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, silently asking if she wanted to leave. She hesitated, not because she wanted revenge, but because part of her wanted answers. Why do people still assume wealth looks a certain way? Why is kindness mistaken for weakness? Inside the store, another customer, a well-dressed woman who had watched the entire scene unfold, started filming quietly with her phone. She'd seen the way the assistant had sneered, heard the coldness in her voice, and now she saw how fast the tone had changed. She didn't know who the man was, but she knew hypocrisy when she saw it. Meanwhile, a young employee near the register whispered to a coworker, "That's Alexander Reeve, the tech guy, the one who bought that island last year." Suddenly, everything clicked. But Alexander wasn't here to make a scene. That wasn't his style. He believed in letting people reveal who they really were, and today they had. As the store tried to recover its balance, the atmosphere thickened with discomfort. No one knew what he'd say or do next. The assistant's smile faded. The manager glanced toward the back office, unsure if he should call someone. Because when a quiet man with real power walks in, sometimes silence is the loudest warning of all. The silence inside the store was thick enough to stop time. Everyone stood still, waiting for Alexander to speak. The assistant kept shifting her weight from foot to foot, trying to shrink into the background. The manager cleared his throat, forcing a weak chuckle, and said, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Alexander finally looked up. His voice was low, steady. "No, there was no misunderstanding. You saw a woman dressed simply and assumed she didn't belong here. You didn't ask if she needed help. You didn't treat her like a customer. You treated her like she was invisible." The words echoed through the store, calm but cutting. The assistant's eyes darted around, desperate for someone, anyone, to step in. But no one moved. No one wanted to be part of the mess now unfolding. His wife stood silently beside him. She wasn't angry, just deeply disappointed. This wasn't about money. It wasn't even about her. It was about something bigger. How often people are judged for not fitting into someone else's idea of wealth or worth. Outside, a few more people had gathered, curious about what was happening. The woman with the phone kept recording, her brows furrowed, capturing every second. The video would later go viral, but in this moment, no one thought about cameras or consequences, only the tension pressing in from all sides. Alexander stepped closer to the counter. "Let me ask you something," he said, his tone still calm. "If I had walked in here first, and not my wife, would you have treated her the same?" The assistant opened her mouth but couldn't find the words. And that's when he reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the counter, something that made the manager's face go pale. Everything was about to change. The object he placed on the counter was a sleek, black credit card, one so exclusive, only a handful of people in the world even qualified to own it. The manager's face dropped. The assistant's eyes widened. For the first time, the truth of who they had turned away hit them like a wave. But Alexander wasn't done. He slid the card toward the edge of the counter, then paused. "I was going to surprise my wife today," he said quietly. "She's been eyeing something special here for months." He glanced at her with a warm, knowing look. "But now I'm wondering, should we take our business somewhere that values people, not appearances?" The manager stammered, trying to recover, offering nervous apologies, discount promises, anything to undo what had been done. But before Alexander could respond, another voice entered the scene, firm and unfamiliar. "Excuse me, sir," said a tall man in a sharp suit, walking in through the front doors. "I'm from corporate. We received a complaint and a video." All eyes turned to the woman still holding her phone. She nodded slightly but didn't speak. The corporate man walked straight to the manager and handed him a sealed envelope. "This is serious. We take discrimination very seriously. I'm going to need to speak with your entire staff." Now the tension shifted. What began as humiliation for one woman had become a spotlight on the entire store. The assistant looked ready to cry. The manager had gone pale. Customers were pulling out their phones. Alexander stepped back, his expression unreadable. His wife gently took his hand, still silent, watching it all unfold. No one could have predicted what would happen next. Because this wasn't just about a purchase anymore, it was about consequences, real ones. The corporate manager didn't waste time. He gathered the employees at the center of the store while customers looked on, some filming, others whispering. The assistant, now visibly shaking, tried to explain herself, but the footage spoke louder than any excuse. The corporate rep looked at her, then at the manager and simply said, "We have strict policies about how customers are treated. You both will be placed on immediate suspension pending investigation." Gasps rippled through the store. The assistant started to protest, her voice cracking, but was met with silence. No one stepped in to defend her, not even the co-workers who had laughed along earlier. Alexander turned to his wife. "Let's go," he said gently, but before they could walk out, the corporate rep added, "Mr. Reeve, I hope you'll accept our sincere apologies. We value your loyalty and would be honored if you'd allow us to make this right." He paused, glanced around the store, and then gave a small smile. "Actually," he said, "there's one way." He motioned to the young employee near the register, the one who had recognized him earlier. "Promote her." I saw how she tried to step in when no one else did. The young woman's eyes went wide. The store fell silent again. And just like that, the tone of the room shifted, from fear to something closer to hope. Alexander and his wife turned to leave, arm in arm, when a final voice called out. "Sir, wait." It was the assistant, holding her phone, her face pale. "I just got a notification. The video, it's already viral." She wasn't wrong. The story was spreading fast. And with it, the truth. Because sometimes, the richest person in the room isn't the one with the card, it's the one with integrity. Within an hour, the video had spread across social media like wildfire. Millions of views, thousands of comments, and the store's name trending for all the wrong reasons. People weren't just reacting to the billionaire's calm response. They were moved by how his wife handled humiliation with quiet grace. The young employee he recommended for promotion was interviewed later that week. She said she hadn't even realized who the man was at the time. She just thought it was wrong how the woman was treated. Her honesty struck a chord, and the company followed through. She was promoted, and the store announced a full review of staff training and policies. As for the assistant and manager, their suspension turned into a permanent dismissal. The company issued a formal apology, but by then, the damage to their reputation was already done. People had seen what happened, and more importantly, they'd seen what not to do. Alexander and his wife never made a public statement. They didn't need to. A quiet dinner at their favorite spot, a soft laugh shared between them. That was enough. They had never been about attention. But this moment, unplanned and raw, had sent a message the world needed to hear. Judging someone based on their appearance is never just a harmless assumption. It's a reflection of values. And sometimes it takes a painful moment to open people's eyes. In the end, the woman who was once humiliated walked away with her head high, not because of the money or the man beside her, but because of her dignity, her strength, and the lesson she left behind for everyone to remember. Because true worth has nothing to do with what's worn on the outside, and everything to do with what's carried within.